There are a number of continuums, a number of evolutionary processes that have a certain characteristic in common. And it's this: as you start out on a curve and move up the intelligence continuum, the efficiency with which energy is transformed into sustainable well-being, if you look at the innovation continuum, how innovative is a given idea, there's a process, and it's a very interesting one, because if we look at this continuum, we're going up, we're going up, we're going up. And at a certain point, if we don't ground, build foundation, integrate, we fall all the way down again. And so it's the Icarus phenomena. But what's going on? Well, one of the things that's going on is a culture has a certain pace of evolution. And it might be seen in the fact that, from what I can tell, my parents did a 30% better job of raising myself and my siblings than their parents. And so this is the natural tendency of evolution, to take something, adopt it, notice its many flaws, and do it a little bit better the next time, and repeat and repeat. Every generation does things a little bit better. Every TV in every decade, since TVs were invented, are getting a little bit better. Every single decade, TVs are getting better. So that's the majority. That's going on in the cult. Now, we know that the majority always represents average, which is, by definition, a state of mediocrity. In a bell curve, you have the average, and you have, the bleeding edges are the innovators, the pioneers, and also the laggards, the people that, they're not going beyond reading and writing. They never learned to read and write, and didn't get around to understanding this and that the average person does understand. So the majority are always in this average terrain. And to be truly innovative, brilliant in any areas, you have to diverge from the majority in the direction of intelligence, meaning that your design, your protocol, is superior. It delivers higher yields. If you're a farmer and you're a brilliant farmer, you take the same land and you generate higher yields with less effort, more sustainably. And that's how you're known for your brilliance. If you are a brilliant farmer and you deliver half of the crop of the neighboring farms and spend far more money and time to do so, you're known for being delusional, because that's not brilliant at all. And so there is a necessary divergence from the norm and from the majority in order to be exceptional. I mean, it's the very definition of the word. To be exceptional is to diverge. And so there's a need to diverge. But what's interesting to me, and what I notice in areas of my life, is that there's a certain amount of divergence, there's a certain amount of innovation that leads to better results. But if you continue to innovate and seek even better results, there's a certain point where it flips, and rather than being brilliant, it is catastrophic, and you instead go all the way down. And I want to talk about why that happens. Well, one of the things is the network effect, because the reason that Facebook is so valuable is not its program. It's a very basic program. The reason that Facebook is so valuable is because it's a very big network. And it's widely adopted. It's the same thing, but because it's a big network, it's relatively frictionless, relatively easy to reach a lot of people on that network. You don't have to learn 20 different networks to reach 20 different people. You just learn one network. And so it's efficient. It's intelligent because of the size of its network. Now, anyone can introduce a superior program to Facebook. It's not hard. Get rid of the ads, stop automating what gets shared, give people a little bit more control, maybe allow you to filter which people connect with you in which ways. There's so many ways to make Facebook a 10 times more valuable experience than it is today. I'm starting with the fact that the majority of Facebook users feel more miserable after using Facebook for an hour than they would have if they went to the gym or actually went and spent time with an actual friend or donated some time in the community. And so, unintelligent people are spending unintelligent time in unintelligent ways, meaning there's easy, known alternatives that would deliver higher yields of sustainable well-being personally and in the community. You think of, spending an hour on Facebook and feeling worse, and 0 people get 0 value, versus spending an hour picking up litter in your town and getting some exercise and going out and meeting and having some body regulation, the street looking more beautiful. Well, everyone gets more value. You get more value. You had more interactions. People thank you. That's always nice. But we're not going to do that because that would be intelligent, right? And what we like to do is do what we've done before or follow our addictive habits. But it's not hard to design something 10 times better than Facebook. But why might it be a bad idea to do something 10 times different from Facebook? Well, a lot of it has to do with network adoption. Because if for some reason, if for any number of reasons, people do not adopt your protocol, if 95% of people still use Facebook and don't use your protocol, even though it's a 10 times better protocol, it doesn't actually deliver in the areas that are being measured. Now, the areas of being measured are often, in an unintelligent system, wrong. Because it's not as important whether or not everyone's using a program that makes most people more unhappy after spending an hour on it than it is whether or not it makes you happy. And so if you design a program that actually makes you and the few people that use it happy, it is still more intelligent to use that program rather than to use Facebook. But what if you design a program that nobody uses? that's better. You see, there's a certain point that, where Icarus gets too close to the sun, too enamored with the ideal, and the thing falls apart. And this is true with identity as well. If you develop an identity, your own language, your own symbology, your own everything, and it's wonderfully efficient and intelligent and all these benefits, but nobody understands it. If your standards for relationship are so high that you do not actually have any relationships, the ones you theoretically could have would be absolutely brilliant, but you don't actually have any. We're starting to get into that Icarus terrain where it's steep up, you're getting close to perfection, but as you move closer to perfection, you move into isolation. So you have isolation up here. You have, with isolation, dissociation. With dissociation, you have tremendous inefficiencies, around, there not being an adequate network. And, down here, you have your mediocrities, your miseries, etc., and your norms. And so somewhere in between these, how high can you fly, basically, before the wax starts to melt? How close to genius can you go before you go insane? Because insane simply means you've gotten into such a small network that even you can't figure out what you're doing there. You're not actually insane. You've just joined everyone else in losing track with your psychological location. And so you don't know where you are, and nobody else does either. Or, a little before that, you absolutely know where you are, but absolutely no one else can get there. So you're insane to everyone else. And the trouble when you're insane to everyone else is not that you're insane. The trouble is that when nobody can figure out what you're talking about and why you're talking about it, then you lose practice. It's like if no one can hit your tennis ball back because you're too good at playing tennis, then you stop being that good because you don't get to hit very often. And so there's this point where you lose touch with so much of reality, of so much of the norms, that literally, regardless of what's going on, you just stop. The feedback loop disappears. You diverge so far from the herd that you cannot hear them. You call out and they don't hear your voice. You don't get any response from any side. And this is the crisis point. Can you stay tethered to something? And so, a good, and there's also a pain continuum, right? Because everyone longs for love and belonging. I do, you do, it's a human need, right? But you cannot love what you do not understand. You cannot understand what you cannot see clearly. You cannot empathize with what you don't understand. And so there's a point, if you're inventing a brilliant job that nobody has the intelligence to hire you for, you're in this state of grace, this brilliant, this is the ideal job for me, for the world, for this is the ideal job. But if it reaches the point where, you leave this job for a better job and you leave this job for a better job, and you leave this job for a better job, but the better job isn't there. You're waiting, you're unemployed, and the rent is due, and you collapse all the way down. And there can be a psychological collapse as well, meaning from the ecstatic joy of, wow, if only we did this, and if only we did that. But if there's too far a divergence from the herd, then moving deeper into that terrain results in not the transcendent brilliance, but the failure and misunderstanding and going back to basics. And so there's this interesting thing, right before Icarus fell to the ground, he was flying higher than anyone had flown before. And that's when the structure of his technology started to melt. And then he fell farther than anyone had ever fallen before. And so there is a point at which something is too intelligent for a status quo to have a chance of getting off the ground. There is a point where something is so advanced that, like Leonardo's drawings of his helicopters, they're still working on creating the self-propelling machine, in a gym with the very best carbon fiber and all that. They're still trying to bring Leonardo's dream to life, hundreds of years later. And so the point that you want to aim for on these continuum is a point that is as high as you can reach, that still has reasonable odds of integration in a reasonable amount of time. Because if you go too high, too fast, independent of the location and competence of other people, then one moves into more and more isolation. And with isolation comes a certain form of poverty in regulation and skill building, poverty in empathy and understanding. And one is getting in the high atmosphere, and one needs love and belonging. But at a certain point in the high atmosphere, nobody understands that which needs love and belonging. All children, all creative enterprise requires the nurturing, the love of the parent, of the community. And if it gets out of view too high up there, to where it doesn't seem relevant to the people around you, then the birth child that took so much energy to ascend lacks the nourishment to hold its structure, gets too fragile and falls to the ground, and becomes, with this comes the psychological descent from ecstatic joy up here down to despair and depression and loneliness right here. In other words, if you're a plane, there's an angle of attack, they call it, because we use a lot of military technology, but really there's an ascent point where if your propeller is moving at a certain speed, you can go at a certain ascent. If your propeller is going fast enough, you can ascend directly. But most planes do not have a powerful enough energy that they can literally shoot straight upward. Most people do not have a motivational structure such that they can ascend vertically and sustain that from their own energy. So there's an ascent that if you go above that ascent, you stall. And once you stall, you drop. And if you're lucky and you know what you're doing, you dive, pick up speed, and then you come back to a sustainable climb. And that's really what this is about. What is the rate of ascent towards intelligence that you can begin and continue and sustain? And do you take people along? Do you build allies along the way who understand and are exploring this with you? Or do you diverge to such a point where nobody's tracking what you're doing? Nobody's getting this far so that by the time you show up, over here, they don't see you. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know why this is such a big breakthrough. And so this is also, where proof of concept, proof of value, reintegration with the cult around us is important to demonstrate. We went off on a hero's journey over here. We came back and we brought value to the tribe. Then we went on a higher journey and we brought value back to the tribe. It's an ascent. It's a spiral ascent that stops off along the way, bringing value to the tribe so that there's a pattern that forms. We didn't know what he was talking about there, but it's what Elon Musk has done, because even his own friends told him that he was absolutely nuts to start a solar company, to start an electric car company, and to start a space company. Everyone gave him a really hard time. He was the biggest shorted stock on Wall Street. The military went out of their way to be unaccommodating. The big boys, Lockheed and Boeing, bribed and rigged the system so that he wouldn't get as many contracts. There was a lot of guns aiming at Elon, and all of his friends told him, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it," right? Because you're going into the unknown. And he was lucky. He was smart. He was 100-hour-a-week hardworking. He had higher pain tolerance than 90% of the people on the planet. And he had a reason to keep going. And so, as it stands today, all three of his companies, SolarCity, SpaceX, and Tesla, which is now the most valuable car company in the world. So, 3 years ago, you could listen to Bob Lutz, the great expert in stuff, talking about how Elon would absolutely fail. You can still have Buffett and Munger today. Tesla's rat poison, right? But Elon's delivered and delivered and delivered. He delivered with PayPal. He delivered with Zip2. He's built the highest rated car ever tested by Consumer Reports. And each of these touchstones are changing the narrative. So now Elon's doing new things, the Boring Company, Starlink, Neuralink. You see, but because he touched back and delivered value and didn't just continue the ascent, he's now got people who can't wait, because whatever Elon's going to do, he's going to win. He hasn't failed yet. He won with PayPal when nobody said he could start a bank and transfer money by email. He won with SolarCity, which is a world leader in a number of different metrics. He won with the Model S, the longest running, most safe and most valuable tested car, in Consumer Reports history. He's just beat out Bezos with SpaceX. But and then the share which everyone betted against. More people bet against Tesla than any other company on Wall Street. And every single one of those people who bet against Tesla lost money. And the people who bet with Tesla experienced 1,000% return. I'm one of them. In a single year, 1,000% return on investment. But Elon is not starting an electric plane company. He'd love to. He gave Hyperloop to Virgin Galactic and others to do because he understands that he cannot go vertical. He cannot do all things perfectly all at once. So there's so many things that are being delayed. There's a steep angle of attack. Tesla is expanding at the rate of 100% per year in production, in size. I mean, it's an exponential growth curve to have 100% growth every single year. It's incredible. Or maybe it's 50% growth every single year, 50% growth. But that's faster. Many of the other car companies are losing market share, whereas Tesla is gaining market share year after year. So that's really the gist of all of this, is to find the realist. How strong is your motor? And what can you tackle? At what rate of innovation and intelligence? And sustain it, not stall out, not get halfway across the Atlantic and crash. And this is about knowing boundaries, the boundaries of your cult. Because if you've got 1,000 people at your back, you can do anything. If you have all the billionaires lined up against your back and saying, we'll give you all the money, you can do anything. But if no one wants to pick up the phone and talk to you, and you've still got to pay the rent, and you've got a vision that's 10 years out before it may generate some income, that's where you're getting close to this state of collapse, which is many small businesses. 90% of all new businesses fail within a matter of years because they couldn't sustain the growth. Many marriages, you take off, you fall in, you're falling in love, and then it crashes. I got to get back to work. I got to do this. I can't sustain this angle of attack, and so it plateaus. Up here, you have insanity, loneliness, dissociation, isolation, fragmentation. Down here, you have, the mediocrity of the norm. And in between, you have, a probability field. You have an angle of attack. But it's important to put in bridges along the way, anchors along the way. The fallback points as you're climbing and ascending. A good climber will put in, I think they're called pintons or whatever they are, those things that you hammer into the stone face, and then tie a rope to it so that as they reach for a place they've never been before and fall, they're falling back 10 feet. and then they can climb again. They're not falling all the way down to the ground. And that's having support people, allies, locking in some profits. And so Elon is certainly more of an Icarus than most people, but he's also willing to fail, meaning he thought there was a very good chance he would fail as well, but he put in 100-hour weeks anyway because he thought it was a good thing to fail at. So there you have it. The Icarus factor, the continuum of intelligence. How high can you go before your mechanism freezes up, before your wax melts and you fall to the ground? Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.